News of the impossible human demand traveled through the Coalition fleet like wildfire. In the council chambers of the massive command ship, 36 different alien species gathered to hear about the lone human vessel that claimed it could defeat their combined might. The representatives burst into laughter when Admiral Vextar reported Captain Morrison's offer to accept their surrender. The Altarian ambassador was still chuckling, as he pointed out that one human ship against 200 Coalition vessels was not a battle but a mercy killing. The Krathan war chief flexed his 4 arms and declared that humans had proven themselves weak prey animals who only understood force. Even the peaceful Valdris shook their crystalline heads at human foolishness. But Lisa Park sat in the back of the chamber and felt sick to her stomach. She had been studying the sensor data from the Sovereign for the past hour and nothing made sense. The ship's energy readings were off every chart she had access to. More disturbing was how it had appeared in their space without triggering any of the early warning systems that should have detected it long before it arrived. The human ship existed in a way that defied physics, as the Coalition understood it. Scans showed it was definitely there, but also somehow not entirely present in normal space. The readings reminded her of theoretical papers about dimensional phase technology that human scientists had published years ago, but everyone assumed were impossible fantasy. Admiral Vextar was growing tired of alien politics and wanted action. He stood before the assembled representatives and declared that one demonstration would end this farce permanently. A single shot from any Coalition ship would show the humans exactly how outclassed they were. Then they could discuss surrender, terms from the proper perspective. The Admiral selected the heavy cruiser Dominator for the task. Captain Zarn was known throughout the fleet for his precision shooting and aggressive tactics. His ship carried some of the most advanced weapons in Coalition space, and his crew had never failed to complete a mission. If anyone could humble the arrogant humans, it was Zarn. The Dominator broke formation and moved toward the Sovereign with weapons charging and targeting systems locked on. Captain Zarn opened a channel to the human ship and informed Captain Morrison that he had exactly 1 minute to surrender before his vessel was reduced to scrap metal floating in space. Captain Morrison's response was calm and almost friendly. He thanked Captain Zarn for the warning, but suggested that the Zephyrian captain might want to check with his tactical officer before proceeding. The human mentioned that Lieutenant Ryan Baker had been running some interesting calculations about Coalition ship designs and weapon systems. Captain Zarn laughed at the human's pathetic attempt at psychological warfare. His ship was protected by shields that could stop a direct hit from a star and armed with weapons that could crack a planet. No human technology could threaten the Dominator or any other Coalition vessel. The heavy cruiser opened fire with its primary plasma cannons. Streams of superheated energy that could melt through solid metal struck the Sovereign dead center. The shots were perfect and should have vaporized the human ship instantly. Instead, they simply vanished into the same strange space that had absorbed the destroyer's attack. Then something impossible happened. The Sovereign began to change. The smooth, dark hull seemed to ripple and shift as if it was made of liquid metal instead of solid matter. Sections of the ship folded in on themselves while other parts extended outward in configurations that hurt to look at directly. Captain Morrison's voice came over the communication system again, but now it carried an edge of steel that made every alien listening feel cold fear creep up their spines. He said that the Coalition had just fired on a human vessel without provocation, and that such actions required an appropriate response. The Sovereign fired a single shot at the Dominator. There was no visible beam or projectile, but every sensor in the Coalition fleet detected something moving through space at speeds that should have been impossible. The shot struck the heavy cruiser's forward shield array and kept going as if the shields were not even there. What happened next would be studied by military tacticians for centuries. The Dominator did not explode or break apart. Instead, it began to age rapidly, as if time itself was moving faster around the ship. Metal corroded and systems failed as decades of wear and tear happened in seconds. The crew inside screamed as their bodies experienced the same temporal acceleration. Within minutes, the mighty heavy cruiser was nothing but a rusted skeleton floating dead in space. Its crew had died of old age in the time it took to drink a cup of coffee. The ship that had been the pride of the Zephyrian fleet was now ancient wreckage that would crumble at the slightest touch. The silence in the Coalition Council chamber was absolute. Representatives who had been laughing minutes before now stared at their displays in horror. 2 ships had attacked the human vessel, and both had been destroyed by weapons that operated beyond their understanding of possible technology. Admiral Vextar found his voice first, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. He asked Captain Morrison what kind of ship he was commanding, and what the humans had done to themselves during this war. The question that every alien was thinking but afraid to ask. Captain Morrison's answer changed everything. He activated a holographic projection that appeared in the center of every Coalition ship simultaneously. The image showed not one human vessel but thousands, an entire fleet that had been hiding in the same dimensional space as the Sovereign materialized. Around the Coalition forces like ghosts becoming solid. The ghost fleet stretched in every direction as far as sensors could detect. Sleek predatory shapes that bent light and space around themselves until reality itself seemed uncertain. Ships that existed in normal space but also somewhere else entirely, where Coalition weapons could not reach them, but human weapons could, strike anywhere they chose. Captain Morrison introduced his fleet with the casual tone of someone showing off a new car, rather than revealing the most advanced military force in galactic history. He mentioned that they had been watching the Coalition for quite some time, and had learned many interesting things about their technology and tactics. The humans had not been losing the war as everyone believed. They had been studying their enemies and preparing for this moment when they would reveal what humanity could become, when pushed beyond all limits. Every defeat had been carefully planned to gather intelligence while keeping their true capabilities hidden. Lisa Park realized that her former species had evolved beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans had turned their apparent weakness into their greatest strength, and used the Coalition's overconfidence as a weapon more deadly than any gun or bomb. The holographic display that filled the space between the fleets showed images that made every Coalition representative wish they had never heard of humanity. Captain Morrison's voice carried across all communication channels as he began to tell the real story of this war. His words were calm and measured, but they carried the weight of absolute truth. The first image showed the human colony of New Hope as it had been before the war. Peaceful settlements where human families had built homes among alien forests under foreign stars. Children played in gardens while their parents worked to create something beautiful in the darkness of space. It was everything the human species dreamed of when they first reached for the stars. The second image showed what the Zephyrians had done to New Hope when they captured it. The colony had not been simply destroyed as military reports claimed. Instead, it had become a testing ground for biological weapons that violated every treaty and galactic law. Human colonists had been used as living laboratory subjects for experiments too horrible to describe. Admiral Vextar felt his blood freeze as he recognized classified research that was supposed to be completely secret. The Zephyrian military had been developing biological weapons designed specifically to target human physiology. They had used captured colonists to test different combinations of viruses and toxins to find the most effective ways to kill humans slowly and painfully. Images showed children who had been infected with experimental diseases, while their parents were forced to watch, families torn apart by biological agents that attacked specific human genetic markers. Scientists in Zephyrian uniforms taking careful notes while humans died in agony from weapons designed to cause maximum suffering. Captain Morrison's voice never changed tone as he described what humanity had felt when they discovered the truth about New Hope. The rage that had burned through every human settlement when they learned their people had been tortured to death in the name of scientific advancement. The cold fury that had driven an entire species to reinvent themselves in ways the galaxy never imagined possible. That was when humanity had stopped playing by galactic rules. That was when they had decided to show the Coalition what humans could become when they abandoned all limits and moral constraints that civilized species accepted. The experimental stations on New Hope had created something far more dangerous than any biological weapon. They had created humanity's unlimited potential for revenge. Chief Engineer Sam Carter's voice joined the transmission as technical specifications began flowing across Coalition screens. The data described weapons and defensive systems that operated on principles the galaxy's finest scientists had dismissed as impossible. Dimensional phase generators that allowed ships to exist partially outside normal space where conventional weapons could not reach them. Quantum entanglement cannons that could strike targets through folded space without any projectile crossing the distance between ships. Temporal manipulation fields that could accelerate or slow the flow of time around specific targets. Energy absorption matrices that could capture any form of attack and redirect it with compound interest. The technology was decades ahead of anything the Coalition possessed, but the development timeline showed it had all been created in the past year. Humanity had leaped from primitive spaceflight to mastery of fundamental forces in a period that should have taken centuries. The impossible advancement could only be explained by a species that had abandoned every safety protocol and ethical limitation. Lisa Park listened to the technical data with growing horror as she realized what her former species had done to themselves. Humans had always been known for their adaptability and willingness to take risks that other species considered insane. But this was beyond anything anyone had imagined possible. They had restructured their entire civilization around a single goal. Everything humanity possessed had been focused on developing the tools necessary to make the Coalition pay for New Hope. Every human mind had been dedicated to solving the puzzle of dimensional manipulation. Every resource had been poured into weapons research that pushed the boundaries of physical law. Admiral Vextar tried to interrupt the transmission with claims that such rapid advancement was impossible. No species could develop such technology in so short a time without destroying themselves in the process. The power requirements alone should have consumed every energy source humanity possessed. Captain Morrison's response revealed the true scope of human transformation. Humanity had not just developed new technology, they had evolved beyond the biological and social limitations that constrained other species. Human consciousness had been enhanced through direct neural integration with quantum computers that operated faster than thought. Human society had restructured itself into a collective intelligence that could focus the mental power of billions of minds on specific problems. Individual humans still existed, but they were connected through technological networks that allowed them to share knowledge and computational power instantaneously. The species that had been dismissed as primitive, barbarians had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a collective intelligence with the technological mastery to manipulate fundamental forces, and the focused rage of a people who would never forget what had been done to their children. Lieutenant Ryan Baker's tactical analysis began displaying on every Coalition screen showing precise calculations for destroying every ship in their fleet. The mathematics were perfect and accounted for every variable, including defensive measures that had not been publicly disclosed. The humans had been studying Coalition military capabilities for months while pretending to lose battles. Every human defeat had been carefully orchestrated to gather intelligence about alien weapons and tactics. Every desperate retreat had positioned human assets to observe Coalition responses and learn their patterns. The entire war had been one massive intelligence-gathering operation disguised as a series of military disasters. The Coalition had been fighting shadows while the real human military prepared for a war that would be decided in minutes rather than months. The Ghost Fleet represented the culmination of human planning and technological development focused on a single objective: the complete neutralization of every threat to human survival. Captain Morrison concluded his presentation with words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. He said that humanity had learned an important lesson from New Hope about the true nature of galactic civilization. The galaxy respected only power and understood only force, so humanity had become the most powerful force the galaxy had ever seen. The choice now belonged to the Coalition. They could surrender and accept terms that would allow them to continue existing under human oversight. Or they could fight and discover exactly what an unlimited human war machine could accomplish when every constraint was removed. The Coalition Council chamber filled with desperate voices as representatives from 36 species tried to understand how completely their situation had changed. What had begun as a routine military operation to eliminate an upstart species had become a nightmare where they faced extinction at the hands of creatures they had dismissed as primitive animals. Admiral Vextar stared at displays showing thousands of human ships surrounding his fleet in perfect formation. Each vessel radiated energy signatures that defied everything he understood about physics and engineering. The humans had not just developed superior technology, they had rewritten the fundamental rules of how technology could work. The tactical readouts painted a picture of absolute helplessness. Every coalition ship was targeted by multiple human vessels, using weapons that operated outside normal space. Their shields would be useless against attacks that came from dimensional angles they could not detect or defend against. Their armor was meaningless against weapons that could unmake matter at the molecular level. But worse than the military situation was the psychological impact of knowing they faced an enemy that had transcended every limitation they thought governed intelligent life. The humans had sacrificed everything that made them recognizably alive in pursuit of power, sufficient to destroy anyone who threatened them. Captain Morrison's terms arrived through official diplomatic channels, and they were both generous and terrifying. The coalition would withdraw from all human territory and pay reparations for the atrocities committed at New Hope. All biological weapons research would be destroyed under human supervision. Coalition military forces would be reduced to levels sufficient only for defense against external threats. In exchange, humanity would share selected technologies that could benefit all species and establish trade relationships that would make the coalition stronger than ever before. The humans were not interested in conquest or occupation. They wanted partnership, but only with species that proved they could be trusted never to threaten human children again. The alternative was clearly stated in mathematical terms that left no room for interpretation. Lieutenant Ryan Baker's calculation showed exactly how the human fleet would destroy every coalition vessel in approximately 12 minutes. The attack plan was so detailed, it included the names of ships that would be targeted first and the sequence in which each vessel would be eliminated. Coalition military commanders studied the human battle plan with growing despair. Every defensive strategy they could conceive had already been anticipated and countered. Every escape route had been blocked by human ships positioned with perfect precision. The tactical superiority was so overwhelming that resistance would only determine how quickly they died. Lisa Park found herself caught between two species as the coalition leadership struggled with their impossible choice. Her human origins made her suspect to aliens who now saw humanity as an existential threat. But her defection made her equally unwelcome among humans who had evolved beyond anything she recognized. She accessed her personal records from before the war and compared them to current human transmission protocols. The technical specifications alone showed changes so fundamental that humanity might as well have been a completely different species. They had enhanced their intelligence beyond biological limits and restructured their society around collective decision-making that operated at quantum speeds. The humans monitoring coalition communications were no longer entirely human in any meaningful sense. They had become something unprecedented that combined biological creativity with technological precision in ways that created capabilities no other species could match. They were still recognizably human in their emotions and motivations, but their abilities had transcended every boundary that constrained normal life. Admiral Vextar opened a private channel to Coalition High Command and reported that surrender was their only option for survival. The human fleet represented technological superiority so complete that conventional military thinking no longer applied. Fighting would accomplish nothing except ensuring that coalition civilization ended within the hour. The response from coalition leadership was predictable panic as politicians who had never faced real danger struggled to accept that their military supremacy was an illusion. They demanded detailed analyses of human capabilities and insisted that some defensive strategy must exist that could protect their empire from complete destruction. Captain Morrison's voice interrupted their desperate planning with an announcement that time was running short. He said that human patience was not unlimited, and that the coalition had already consumed most of their allocated decision period. The choice between surrender and annihilation needed to be made quickly before events moved beyond diplomatic solutions. The humans began demonstrating their tactical capabilities by targeting specific non-essential systems on coalition ships. Communications arrays vanished with surgical precision. Sensor clusters ceased to exist without affecting surrounding hull sections. Weapon systems disappeared, leaving behind perfectly smooth metal where complex machinery had been installed. Each demonstration proved that human weapons could strike any target they chose with absolute accuracy, while leaving everything else completely untouched. The Coalition fleet was helpless not because they could not fight, but because fighting was irrelevant when the enemy could selectively destroy any component of any ship from any distance. Chief Engineer Sam Carter's voice joined the transmission to explain that dimensional targeting allowed human weapons to ignore obstacles like shields or armor. The shots traveled through folded space and materialized inside their targets without crossing the intervening distance. No defensive technology could stop attacks that came from directions that did not exist in normal three-dimensional space. The scientific explanation was almost worse than the weapons themselves because it proved that humans had mastered forces that Coalition scientists barely understood in theory. They had weaponized discoveries that other species considered abstract mathematical concepts with no practical applications. Coalition representatives began accepting the inevitable as reports arrived from their home systems describing human ships appearing without warning throughout their territory. The Ghost Fleet was not limited to this single engagement, but was simultaneously present in every major Coalition system. Humanity had positioned forces to destroy their entire civilization if the surrender terms were rejected. The scope of human planning became clear as intelligence reports detailed how human agents had been gathering information throughout Coalition space for months while pretending to be refugees or traders. Every major military installation had been mapped and targeted. Every defensive position had been analyzed and countered. Admiral Vextar realized that the war had been over before it began. Humanity had spent the past year preparing for this moment while the Coalition believed they were winning easy victories against inferior opponents. Every human loss had been part of a larger strategy designed to position forces and gather intelligence for the final confrontation. With 30 minutes remaining before the human deadline, Admiral Vextar made the decision that would preserve Coalition civilization. He opened a channel to Captain Morrison and formally requested terms for surrender that would allow his people to survive their encounter with humanity's unlimited potential for violence. The surrender ceremony aboard the Sovereign would be remembered as the moment galactic civilization entered a new age. Admiral Vextar stood in the human ship's conference room and signed documents that officially ended Coalition military supremacy, while beginning an era where humanity held ultimate authority over interstellar affairs. Captain Morrison accepted the surrender with dignity and restraint that surprised every alien observer. There was no gloating or triumphant speeches about human superiority. Instead, the human captain spoke about partnership and cooperation between species that could build something greater than any single civilization could achieve alone. The terms that humanity imposed were strict, but not vengeful. Coalition military forces would be reduced to defensive levels only, and all biological weapons programs would be eliminated under human supervision. Reparations would be paid to survivors of human colonies that had been destroyed, but the amounts were reasonable rather than crippling. Most importantly, humanity offered to share selected technologies with former enemies who proved they could be trusted with advanced capabilities. The dimensional phase generators that made human ships nearly invulnerable could protect Coalition worlds from external threats. Quantum communication systems could connect distant colonies instantly. Medical advances could extend lifespans and eliminate diseases that had plagued alien species for millennia. Lisa Park found herself appointed as cultural liaison between humanity and the Coalition species. Her unique position as someone who understood both human and alien perspectives made her valuable for bridging the gap between civilizations that had evolved in completely different directions. Standing on the bridge of the Sovereign, she watched as mixed human and alien crews began working together on research projects that combined the best aspects of different technological approaches. Human creativity enhanced by quantum intelligence networks merged with alien scientific traditions that had developed over thousands of years. Chief Engineer Sam Carter was practically vibrating with excitement as he explained how Zephyrian quantum processors could be integrated with human dimensional manipulators to create computational systems that existed partially outside normal space. The processing power would be sufficient to model entire star systems in real time, or calculate the long-term effects of any policy decision. The technological cooperation was producing advances that neither humans nor aliens could have achieved, working separately. Altarian bio-neural networks combined with human enhancement technology created medical systems that could repair any injury or illness. Crathen metallurgy merged with human dimensional science produced materials that were literally indestructible. But the most significant change was philosophical rather than technological. The demonstration of human capabilities had forced every species in the galaxy to reconsider their assumptions about intelligence and evolution. The humans had proven that any species could transcend their biological limitations if they were willing to pay the necessary price. Other civilizations began their own enhancement programs in desperate attempts to avoid falling too far behind human development. Some focused on genetic modification, while others pursued technological integration similar to what humanity had achieved. A few species chose more exotic paths like consciousness transfer or collective intelligence networks. The galaxy entered a period of rapid change as every species rushed to unlock their own unlimited potential before they became obsolete. Competition between different enhancement philosophies drove innovation at speeds that would have been impossible under the old system where change happened slowly over centuries. Humanity found itself in the unexpected role of moderator rather than conqueror. Their superior technology made them the ultimate arbiters of disputes between species that might otherwise have led to devastating wars. Human intervention could end any conflict instantly by demonstrating overwhelming force that made resistance pointless. Captain Morrison established protocols for human involvement in galactic affairs that balanced intervention with restraint. Humanity would prevent wars between other species and protect developing civilizations from exploitation, but would not interfere in internal affairs unless fundamental rights were violated. The new system created unprecedented stability as species that had been enemies for millennia found themselves cooperating under human oversight. Trade relationships flourished when conflicts could be resolved through negotiation rather than warfare. Scientific collaboration accelerated when research could be shared without fear of military applications. Admiral Vextar accepted his new position as coalition military coordinator, working under human supervision. His role was to ensure that coalition forces remained within acceptable limits while maintaining sufficient strength to defend against external threats that humanity might not detect in time. The former enemies developed mutual respect as they worked together on projects that benefited both civilizations. Zephyrian military precision complemented human tactical innovation to create defensive strategies that could protect any world from attack. Coalition logistical networks enhanced human rapid response capabilities to cover more territory than either side could manage alone. Lisa Park documented the transformation of galactic civilization in reports that would be studied by future historians. The speed of change was unprecedented. A species that had been stagnant for thousands of years suddenly found themselves evolving at rates that compressed centuries of development into single years. The lesson of the Ghost Fleet became the foundation of new galactic law. No species would be allowed to threaten another with extinction or conduct experiments on sentient beings. Humanity had proven that such actions would inevitably create enemies with unlimited potential for revenge who would pursue justice regardless of cost. Peace through superior firepower became the organizing principle of interstellar relations. Every species knew that stepping beyond acceptable boundaries would bring human attention, and human attention meant facing weapons that could unmake matter itself, guided by intelligence that could predict every possible response. But the peace was not imposed through fear alone. The technological benefits of cooperation with humanity created incentives for good behavior that made compliance rewarding, rather than merely necessary. Species that worked within human guidelines found themselves stronger and more prosperous than they had ever been under the old system. Years later, when historians tried to identify the moment when everything changed, they always returned to the image of a single human ship arriving at the edge of Zephyrian space. The Sovereign had carried more than weapons and crew. It had transported the proof that any species could evolve beyond every limitation if they possessed sufficient motivation. The galaxy learned that humanity's most dangerous characteristic was not their technology or their tactics, but their refusal to accept that anything was impossible when the survival of their children was at stake. The alarm screamed through the Zephyrian command center as sensors picked up something impossible. A single human ship had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of their most protected system. Admiral Vextar stared at the display screen, with his yellow eyes wide and his scaled hands gripping the command chair until his claws left marks in the metal. For 3 months, the war had been going exactly as planned. Human colonies burned across the galaxy, while the mighty Zephyrian fleet crushed every defense the weak humans could manage. Earth itself was cut off and helpless with no way to send help to their dying settlements. The humans had lost every major battle and their pathetic fleet was scattered and broken. So why was there a human ship here in the heart of Zephyrian space? The tactical officer turned from his station with confusion written across his reptilian features. The human vessel was not broadcasting any distress signals or surrender codes. It was not trying to run or hide. It simply sat there in space like it owned the place and waited. Commander Lisa Park felt ice form in her stomach as she watched the readings. She had been human once before she saw the truth about which side would win this war. She knew human tactics better than anyone else in the Zephyrian military, and this felt wrong. Humans never sent single ships anywhere unless they had a very good reason. The ship identified itself as the UES Sovereign, which meant nothing to any database in Zephyrian records. It was not on any list of known human vessels, and its design did not match anything the intelligence services had seen before. The hull was smooth and dark, with lines that seemed to bend light around them in strange ways. Admiral Vextar opened a communication channel to the human ship. His voice carried the authority of someone who commanded the most powerful fleet in known space. 200 Zephyrian warships surrounded the lone human vessel like predators circling wounded prey. The response came back clear and calm from someone who identified himself as Captain Jake Morrison. His voice held no fear or desperation despite being outnumbered by impossible odds. Instead, there was something that almost sounded like amusement. Captain Morrison spoke like a man who held all the cards in a game everyone else thought they understood. He said he wanted to discuss terms with coalition leadership, which made every alien in the command center laugh out loud. The humans were finished, and everyone knew it. But Lisa Park was not laughing. She studied the sensor readings from the Sovereign with growing worry. The energy signatures coming from the human ship made no sense. Her instruments were giving readings that should have been impossible. The ship seemed to exist in normal space, but also somehow not quite there at the same time. Admiral Vextar found the human captain's confidence insulting. How dare this representative of a beaten species speak as if he had any power to make demands? The admiral decided to show the human exactly how helpless his situation really was. The Zephyrian fleet moved into perfect attack formation, with weapons powered and shields raised. Every gun in the fleet could reduce the human ship to atoms in seconds. The overwhelming firepower display was meant to break the human captain's spirit and force him to beg for mercy. Captain Morrison's voice came through the communication system again, and this time he sounded almost sorry for what was about to happen. He said that Admiral Vextar might want to reconsider his current course of action. The human captain mentioned something about his tactical officer, Lieutenant Ryan Baker, having already calculated firing solutions for every ship in the Zephyrian fleet. The aliens in the command center found this claim ridiculous. One human ship could not possibly threaten 200 advanced Zephyrian warships. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything humans had ever built. Their shields could stop any weapon humans possessed, and their guns could punch through any armor humans had ever made. Admiral Vextar decided to end this farce. He ordered the destroyer closest to the human ship to disable its engines with a precise shot. The destroyer captain was eager to show these upstart humans their place in the galaxy. His ship moved forward with confidence born from a lifetime of easy victories over inferior opponents. The destroyer powered up its main disruptor array and took careful aim at the Sovereign's engine section. The beam that fired was powerful enough to cut through a mountain and accurate enough to remove a single bolt from a ship's hull. It should have crippled the human vessel instantly. Instead, the beam simply vanished. The deadly energy disappeared. into what looked like empty space around the human ship, as if it had never existed at all. The destroyer captain stared at his instruments in confusion, because according to every sensor he had, the shot should have connected. Then the Sovereign fired back. The return shot was unlike anything anyone in the Zephyrian fleet had ever seen. There was no visible beam or projectile. One moment the destroyer was there intact and threatening. The next moment it was gone, not destroyed or damaged, but completely absent, as if it had never existed in the first place. Where a kilometer-long warship had been floating in space, there was now nothing, not debris or wreckage or even dust, just empty vacuum where matter had been unmade at the most basic level. 2,000 crew members had ceased to exist without even time to scream. The silence that followed was complete and terrible. Every alien in every ship stared at empty space where their comrade had been. The casual ease with which the human ship had erased a destroyer built with the finest technology in the galaxy made their blood run cold. Captain Morrison's voice broke, the silence with words that would echo through galactic history. He asked if Admiral Vextar would like to reconsider those terms now. The human captain spoke like someone who had just swatted an annoying insect rather than destroyed a warship full of living beings. Lisa Park realized with growing horror that everything she thought she knew about this war had been wrong. The humans had not been losing. They had been planning.